It's beautiful. I'd love to have this place. Look at that light.
If there's any questions that you think I've been sort of like might be interested in,
All right.
I can ask you, actually.
Okay.
Right, you ready?
Yep.
How did the band form?
Take it away. Well, we've all known each other for years since we were kids at school. This is a long question, long answer actually. I don't know how to begin this. It's, I suppose we all hung around clubs in London, but not rock clubs actually. Clubs in that mid-70s time, it was a lot of sort of soul music and dance music, which wasn't really popular at all really then, but it was mainly American imports and things like that. And I mean, if you know London, it's split up into so many different youth cults, all working class sort of based, but everyone has to have an identity in London. I think that probably comes from our poor sort of economic backgrounds. And they grouped together, and there was like what was called soul boys. I suppose we was part of that. And there's kids who are into rock, and there's punks. I mean, we breezed through punk for a little while. I mean, everyone was into that because of the fashion. But anyway, punk had sort of died, and soul music had died really. I mean, that wasn't going anywhere. And there was just like this void where nothing was happening exciting in London at all, or in Britain. And then suddenly in about 1978, this club started called the Blitz, which has now become very famous. I mean, it only actually held about 200 people. But out of those 200 people was us, was Boy George, Visage, Haircut 100, Ultravox, plus lots of other musicians that I can't even think of at the moment, plus managers, young managers that were going to manage these bands, clothes designers, and I mean, it just went on. I mean, there was just lots of young people who just wanted to do something. I don't know what induced that. I think it was boredom probably, and an incentive to have to find something to do because jobs aren't available in Britain. And we formed the band then, thinking, well, you know, let's form a band and let's just play to our mates, these people in the clubs. And we started playing gigs in places that were very un-rockist, simply because we didn't think we'd get on very well playing the local rock venues. So we was playing like those clubs and renting battleships to play on, and it was full out with really strangely dressed people. That was just sort of. So what we were doing, instead of the way a band normally works, which is find an image and sell it to a public, we were the public who had an image, and they found a band, and we represented them.
Great. How did the name Spandau Ballet come about?
That was, I think we stole it from another group. I think one of our friends went to Berlin, and we was just at the time we were looking for a name, and came back and said, I've seen this name Spandau Ballet, and it was written on the toilet wall. So I dare say it was another group that wrote it on the toilet wall.
I mean,
and we stole it, I think.
To intellectualise about it, I think ballet. We did like the idea of ballet. And we wanted that.
We stole the bloody name.
It was Spandau Ballet we stole,
We
but
tried to make it really clever. We stole the name off another group.
right.
Okay, you spell it. I mean, I heard
Cheers,
that
Mark.
your whole sort of becoming what you are now was a big
Contradiction,
stuff.
you know what I mean?
Was it actually planned out as people have made out it was?
What? Sorry.
Your actual plan of becoming so successful, you actually
Well, I think the plan was like simply to do what we wanted to do and not to run the traditional rock treadmill, because we weren't really part of that at the beginning. You know, the rock music in the 70s. 70s music was completely dire as far as I'm concerned. I grew up in a vacuum as far as inspiration was concerned through music. It was the 60s just becoming bourgeois and very old. And we just wanted to play the way we wanted to do, in the clubs we wanted to play in front of the people we wanted to. And at the end of that, when we got our record deal and we was going to play, and people said, right, now you've got to go out and do a tour, we said, well, no, we're not going to do a tour, you know, because we think clubs are much more exciting for young people. And we were the first white band to make a 12-inch record that wasn't funk, just a blatant funk record. And we said, that's our piece of promotional device. When people want to go out at night and dance to Spandau Ballet, they can dance to this. And it just grew from there. Everyone started making 12-inch records, and the club scene and what was called club culture in Britain became enormous. And that, because of that, that developed youth culture, gave youth culture a real identity in England. And because it was a pop group that was fronting it, or pop groups as more and more came along with Duran and Culture Club, people outside of Britain became more aware of it, and the media became aware of it.
Was it the Soho club scene that was more important in your careers? Is that what you sort of like started from when you were talking about the people you were going out with?
Well, no, I mean, when you're at school, there's always like two halves of a class, right? One half of the class is more rock influenced, and the other wears leather jackets and jeans and goes to see rock groups down at the Marquee. And the other half of the class wants to wear something a little bit smarter and go to nightclubs and get involved in records, right? And I think we were on the side of the class that didn't go down to the Marquee and see the local rock groups play every night.
I think the people got a real bad impression outside of Britain about what Spandau Ballet were about and where we come from. They seem to have this idea that because it was into what was called style, that was a Maggot Papers word, it must be middle class, it must be bourgeois. But I think that actually shows their lack of understanding for British youth culture, which is working class. I mean, it comes out of a need for identity. In America, your example would be sort of Puerto Rican lowriders, or maybe if you go up to Harlem, you know, that the kind of style that the black kids have there, and the kind of identity and uniform that they create, in what they wear and how they dance. And that was exactly the same in Britain, but to a larger extent, because we do seem to have a greater amount of poorer people.
Do you feel you've influenced many bands and people with your dress and music?
I think you're bound to. I think being in the group is the most influential thing you can do. That's why some people are silly enough to ask bands what their politics are and actually follow them as well and change their points of view to suit the band they follow. But you do. I think you have to be very careful of how you lead people on. I think you could very easily lead people in the wrong direction.
I think we were the start of the second generation in music. As I said earlier, the 70s was just the 60s becoming much older, and nothing ever really happened that was new. And for one, what we did musically, just not talking about images at all, musically we patronised black music. We stole funk rhythms and we used them. And that was the first time a white band had really done that. And it was in the same way as the Stones patronised black music in '62 and nicked R&B, nicked the blues. And that became the basis of all rock music then for 20 odd years. And now that was the new bands, our generation, funk was probably more relevant, and we took that on. I think also the big change came was in what our inspirations were, and I think they were much more visual. Lennon and McCartney grew up listening to transistor radios and music. Well, we grew up watching the telly, because we were born in the generation that had TV for the first time, in England anyway. I mean, TV really didn't become popular until sort of the late 60s. And then in the sort of early 70s, it became colour. And so my only pop education was visual, and it didn't just concern music. It was like Mad from Uncle, Batman, and commercials and soap operas. So it made more sense that when bands like ourselves, our generation, came along, that we would step much more into making visual things and videos and seeing a visual concept.
Yeah, talking about the videos, in fact, who comes up with the concepts for them, and how do you relate the visuals to your songs? Do you actually go in there with an idea of what you've got in your head, obviously, when you wrote it?
I think the visual side of a song is actually from the moment Gary will write a song, and as soon as it comes to a band, Gary will have certain ideas about the song as soon as he writes it. As soon as it comes to the band, you feel the song, and you can actually picturise lots of things that are happening in the song, even without thinking about doing the video. So you've got lots of ideas before you actually start anyway, I think.
At the end of the day, I think it's the band that's got to have the ideas, because I think out of all the people involved in pop culture that call themselves artists, I think the video directors are the only people that prostitute their art to such a great extent, because one week they'll do us, one week they'll do Iron Maiden, another week they'll do Sheena Easton. And you know so they don't see themselves as having any style at all other than their own. So you know, where a record producer will only produce the kind of bands that he feels that he's right for. And so unless you have a style, an idea and a strong idea, you could easily end up looking like Sheena Easton, you know. So the ideas do come from us, but it goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that we think much more visually now.
What songs do you feel show Spandau at the best?
Well, I think you've got to say the newest album. The newest songs you always... every new record you bring out has got to be the best thing you do, otherwise it's time to give up, isn't it? I mean, so, but for us, we were really pleased. We come under a lot of pressure when we were recording Parade because we had such a big success with the album True. And but we think we've achieved what we set out to do, which was to make a better album than True.
I mean, the reason you always make another album is because you're never completely satisfied. I think, you know, Spandau Live is when we're at our best, to be honest. Although you shouldn't try and just try and get the way you sound live onto a record, because you should treat the studio as an instrument itself and a separate medium. But no, it's live. I do think it's the best we are because it's physical. It's what we're about originally. It's five blokes working together as a unit, and that's exciting. Plus the missing thing which you don't get on any other medium you use, and that's the audience. That's the people who buy your records.
What about personally? Do you personally each have a sort of like a favourite track you've ever recorded?
Maybe chart number 1.
Why was
I
that?
think it means a lot. Not the sound of the record so much as just what it means, because it seemed to sum up what we were getting up to at that time. And like any record, brings back a lot of good memories. And chart number 1 was a good time for Spandau, I think.
I always like the latest single, to be honest. Always like the latest single. At the moment, I quite like Highly Strung because it reminds me of our trip to Hong Kong.
Yeah, I'm just looking back on it and thinking that chart number 1 brings back a lot of good memories.
Actually, in mid-81, when the record chart was out, there was a change in your style. You covered it slightly, but how did that come about? You continually changing.
I think that was just us being a bit more honest about our roots. We've always got bored very quickly about with what we do. We've always wanted to change. Never sort of stuck to a formula just because it's sold.
I think it's just growing up, though. I mean, it's a band that's growing up. I mean, we were like, we've been together, when Chart Number 1 came out, we've been together for 2 years. So the bound to have changed, right? It's like after the songs that usually go onto a band's first album, the songs that the band's been playing for the past 2 years around like parties and clubs or whatever, right? So it goes on, they go on and record the first album. And the songs that go onto the second album are usually the point in which the band has to grow up and say, right, we're writing this album, and what do we like now, and what are our influences now, and we put it down, and that's why I think Chart Number 1 came out really well.
You must, I assume, because two brothers in the band, come from a musical family. Do your parents? Not at all.
A printing family.
No, just factory workers, our parents. And it's not.
So was it just that you started playing musical instruments at school? Were you very young?
Well, being in a band or playing sport are probably the only two outlets that you can really feel that you can express yourself in, really, if you're the kind of person who needs self-expression. There's a lyric on With the Pride, a track on Parade, and it says, I'd rather take this cure for life. Well, cure for life, I think, is what we've discovered in Spandau Ballet. I think life itself cannot be very stimulating, not always very stimulating or very exciting, and it's up to you to find a cure. And I don't think you find it in material things. I mean, I've discovered that since I've been able to afford that sort of stuff. And you don't always discover it in a job, but you can find it maybe in dance, music, anything where you can express yourself through. And that's probably one of the reasons why we needed so much to get into pop culture. It's a way of shouting, "Hey, look at us!"
Who were, if any, Spandau's influences?
Musically. Well, I mean, the first records we ever bought were Slade and T-Rex and Sweet and all the glam stuff, David Bowie, Lily Stardust. And I think that's where your influences start. And if you're interested in music at all, you take the best bits out of absolutely everything you've ever heard, and that usually produces the sound of the band that you're in. And well, that's where it started, I think, Kerry Glitter.
I think apart from our music, our biggest influences are probably our rejections. I mean, like I said, we grew up in like a musical void, really, as far as stimulation was concerned in the 70s. And we always look back on the 60s, and because we never really understood them anyway, it was always in books, as being a time when it was exciting. It was when the boy next door was making good and having success. And I think we always wanted to repeat that in a way. And certainly in 1979, the boy next door was successful once more. And he's now getting to see the world.
Can you actually remember your earliest musical memory? Is there anything that sticks in your mind from being very young? Everyone's sort of like, when they go back to being a child.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was probably seeing David Bowie and then seeing the Sex Pistols when I was 16. You know, there was one of the guys, young guy, he's quite young really. I mean, he's on tour with us at the moment, and he says, I can remember, I actually saw the Beatles, you know. I said, I can't even remember the Beatles existing, but I did see the Sex Pistols, and I met a young punk in London the other day and told him that I actually had seen the Sex Pistols, and he got just as much a buzz out of it as this guy telling me he'd seen the Beatles, you know. He couldn't believe that I would have seen them because he would have been far too young. So my musical memories are probably very early 70s, Bowie and T-Rex and things like that.
What are your current activities?
We're in the middle of a tour. We're starting on a world tour. We just come back from Japan. We started out there, which was very successful. It was very good. Good place to start a tour. It was a lot of fun.
How long were you there for?
We were there for
2 weeks.
2 weeks. It's a lot of fun in Japan as well, starting a tour. But I think the best time of the year always is when you're playing where you live, in your hometown. And next week we're actually playing in London. So I think that's the best time of the year.
Great.
And then next year we're off to Australia and Europe and America. Definitely coming to America. The last tour we did over there went really well. We was really pleased with it. But you know, as always, it takes a long while to get under the American skin. So we're trying.
Always is helping. What are your overviews of the music of the 70s and 80s?
I think, I've discussed my views on the 70s enough. I think the 80s, we're living in a multimedia time now, where a band can no longer just play guitar and get away with it. Now a band is much more of an overall concept, which can loosely sort of be called pop art in a way, pop culture. And they've got to adapt for TV, they've got to have the manifestos, they've got to look right, and they've got to have the whole package. And I don't want it shouldn't be contrived. It should only be as contrived as writing a song and singing cliches can be, you know. It shouldn't be that much contrived. It should be you, it should be your expression. But as artists, rather than just musicians, as creative people, it's exciting because you're always looking for another medium to grab onto. That's why technology has come so far in music. That's why the computer age is happening so quickly in music, because it's mediums that we can work through and express ourselves through. Because I suppose we've all got this overflow of emotion. We all need to sort of channel it into something.
Talking about that, I mean, you're still quite young and you've become so successful. What else is there that you would really like to do?
Nothing really.
I don't think we're not.
Any other careers?
I mean, we're not realised our potential yet, as far as we're concerned.
We're starting on our first world tour, which we've been going 4 years. We've never ever been to Australia. I mean, it's like kicks like that. I dare say it's really hard for a band to stick together when you're on your 7th tour of Australia or something like that. But I mean, we're going to Australia for our first time. We're excited as anybody, you know.
I think the biggest drug is playing live, though. I mean, I could probably give up everything else, but I would find it very hard at the end of the day to give up playing live. So that atmosphere is just so good.
There's nothing else that you think you might be interested in going in?
Well, I think luckily in this.
Or even expanding what you're doing?
Well, I think film is the thing that all bands are going to work more.
Film stars, though. Like
No, I mean, I certainly don't want to be actors, but
I want to be an actor.
I think film is probably where most bands want to get into, because they're having the experiences with films. It's just a stimulating medium, because you can always put music to film. Something we've never done is that. I mean, we've always done it the other way around. We've put film to music, and it would be nice to start on an idea where you're combining everything from scratch, and you know that you're going to make a film that's going to be like this, and the music, and you know, maybe where the visuals are inspiring the music for a change. I think, you know, directing appeals to me much more than acting. I'm not really an actor. Most groups aren't actors. But I think the new age is also going to be where, with technology racing away as it is, bands will have to do that, because the little compact disc is going to come out, and it's not just going to have music on it, it's going to have visuals on it as well. And I think we're almost coming to the end of where the 3-minute video has become a little bit boring now. It's a little bit staid, and the ideas are a little bit suffocated now, where, you know, the surreal landscapes, or, you know, we're all at fault for doing all of these things, but it's going to come to a stage now where someone's going to come up with a very original idea, an original way of doing something, and which will regenerate the whole thing a little bit more.
What was the inspiration in the song True?
Well, when I wrote the album True, it was about communication and the lack of communication between the sexes, or between people in general. I mean, the song Communication was a pun on all of those things, telexes and telephones and return to sender and stuff. But most of the songs are about the lack of communication, how people are never really honest with each other. And then looking back on the songs, I saw how cryptic they were lyrically, and sort of realised that I wasn't being very upfront neither. You know, I was kind of hiding a lot of the true stories behind cryptic or metaphor, and said, well, you know, maybe I should just write a song about that, you know, and how the simple things and honesty is probably more exciting. And, you know, so True came about, you know, this much is true, it's dead simple, you know, there's no complications.
This is really, I suppose, well, there was one for you. As far as sort of like the 1980s, is there any band around you that you could actually say you admire, you're actually almost in competition with, that's a horrible way of putting it?
Well, I think the charts, I mean, every week of the year, forever and ever, there's 30 people in the top 30. So, I mean, you're in competition with another 29 bands. I don't think there's one that sticks out more than any other 29.
I think we do seem to feel that they're more satisfied with the way music is now than in the 70s, in that there is definitely a link, a chain of thought between our generation of bands, us and Coach Club and Duran being sort of at the forefront in most of the world. And it's simply our generation, it's the way we think very differently to the old rock musicians of the 60s and 70s. And we feel a part of, we certainly feel, you know, we're doing something a bit more worthwhile. So I suppose we're happy to see each other getting on, but at the same time we're all immediate competition. But it doesn't really work like that. When you're signing autographs for kids and you see their badges, they've got some of you, some of them, and some of someone else, and you know.
In a few sentences, can you sum up Spandau Ballet?
No, you have to give me a few more hours.
What are you actually about, or what were you when you actually set out? Did you set out to do anything in particular? Can you actually sum up why you're so successful?
I don't know, I mean, it's the same as any band when they first start out. They never imagine themselves finishing, doing 2 nights at the local marquee club, right? You always imagine yourself as big as the Rolling Stones and playing at, you know, 4 days at Wembley Arena or whatever. And that's our own, I think, really.
I think we set out to make music a little bit more relevant for younger people as well, because when I was sort of young, 14 or something, 15, music was made by people who were very old, you know, like in their sort of 30s or something, and it was like nothing to do with me. And their influences were sort of mansion houses and Beverly Hills. And what they were selling to me that didn't inspire me in any way at all. And what we wanted to do was say, make music and to a generation that was closer to us, and give them a lifestyle or represent their lifestyle. So rather than selling them contrived things all the time. And I think that happened. I think video has done that more than anything. In America, what I noticed is that before video came about, if you were going to go and play America, you had to go and play America very early. And the only clubs you could play were all for people over 21. And so, you know, you were immediately alienating the young kids. You weren't there. That was their older brothers' bands. And but with video, video's given us the opportunity not to have to go over so early. And when you do go over, you can play places to every age group. And the young kids come along, and it's the first time you've ever played America, and they say, "This is our group now," you know. They can see something else exciting in it. But we've got quite a cross-section in our audience anyway. We seem to appeal to all ages, which is good.
Have you got any fond memories of anything that has happened on any of your tours or any of your videos?
We've got lots.
They're all too rude to mention, actually.
You must have one that you prefer.
Well, we had our latest video, Highly Strung, at the end of it. It's about the tensions that you feel when you're in a group. At the end of it, I smashed up my guitar as part of the video, and which was brilliant, because I've been playing the guitar since I was 11, and just smashing it up was just fantastic. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be sort of doing all the things I am. So I think my brother felt a bit left out. He thought, that looks good. God, I'd love to do that. So a week after that, we went to Germany to do a TV, and we'd finished Highly Strung. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd all had a few to drink, and we was playing in this German TV show, 5 numbers, and Highly Strung was the last number. The number ended.
We were wrecked. We never had a few.
The number ended, and I turned round, and Martin is ploughing his bass guitar into John's drum kit. And John goes, yeah, stands up, kicks his drum kit over. I throw my guitar up in the air. The sax, I mean, have you ever heard of a saxophone player smashing up a sax? I mean, the only person who felt a bit left out was Tony, so he picked up the mic stand and started smashing all the other equipment that was lying around. And the kids loved it. They were up on stage getting all the instruments. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the people in the record company that were always going on about the good old days, and now, you know, I wish people were like Pete Townsend and Keith Richards. They were great. We're all screaming, oh my God, what have they done? So that was great that night.
That's good.
That's great. That's it, I think. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, not really.
We've done questions.
Okay. Thank you.
No?